For many years, the driving force behind Kuwait's emerging oil industry was Sheikh Ali Khalifa Al Sabah, a member of Kuwait's royal family.
Kuwait was a poor country in a very poor region. To a certain degree, we were better than some of the countries around us in terms of being able to engage in trade and pearl fishing.
For years, pearl fishing kept the Kuwaiti economy afloat. And then, when the Japanese developed cultured pearls at the end of the 1920s, Kuwait's economy was devastated. Oil transformed Kuwait. In 1938, BP and the American company Gulf struck oil. Kuwait's wealth began to build up, but so did its resentment of foreign companies.
My generation was, if you grew up in the Middle East in the 50s and the 60s, the oil companies were monstrous bloodsuckers. Get rid of them, and a brand new world shall be created in the region. The cartel, the Seven Sisters, they had the magic, they had the power, they had the force. And so there was this tremendous sense of these overbearing, powerful entities. And of people feeling at the mercy of these companies.
Gulf and BP had invested treasure and emotions for decades in Kuwait. We thought of ourselves and the Kuwaitis together building something that was important to both of us, and we thought that we were part of that team, we were part of that family. It was a great disappointment, and it was a shock, really an emotional shock to realize they didn't think of it as family at all. They thought they had been exploited.
The activities of Western oil companies meant a large expatriate community. Too often, they made Kuwaitis feel like foreigners in their own country.
The attitude of the foreign oil companies, especially a company like British Petroleum, was to treat the nationals as something below their own nationals. You may not believe it, but as late as 1959, the Habara Club, which is a senior staff club in Ahmadi, the Kuwaiti engineers were not allowed to become members.
It took the personal intervention of the man who is today the Emir of Kuwait to end the club's discrimination against Kuwaitis. But the resentment lingered on.
It didn't seem to us, I think, that we necessarily were doing the wrong thing. But looking back, one realizes more and more, I think, what the seeds of nationalism were leading to.
People felt that important decisions affecting their own life and their own country was being made in London or Pittsburgh. This they did not accept and wanted these decisions, for good or for bad, to be taken by themselves under their own political system.
I always believe that the price of oil in the short term is decided politically. In the long term, the economical factors will prevail. And this is what happened in the past, and this is what's happening today.
At a traditional family engagement party, the man introducing the bride to the groom is Sheikh Ahmed Zaki Yamani. Saudi Arabia's oil minister was a natural matchmaker.
Sheikh Yamani was the quintessential character of the 1970s. It was no longer the simple person of the desert. It was a child of the peninsula who had been educated in the West, who was going to cut a better deal for the Arabs with the West, and who knew the tricks of the West. This was Yamani.
Ahmed Zaki Yamani combined the old and the new. He took over as oil minister at a young age. He had an extraordinary patience in negotiations. And as one oil man said in the early 1970s, he drives you to the wall with sweet reasonableness.
Like the Shah of Iran, Yamani believed the oil prices the West was paying were unreasonably low. At a conference in Tehran, hosted by the Shah, the oil companies were brought to the negotiating table and forced to increase the price of oil by 35 cents a barrel.
The oil-producing countries themselves were able to ask for a seat at that table because they, at this time in the early 1970s, were beginning to say, the oil is mine. I can produce it how I want to produce it, develop it the way I want to, and if you don't so agree, you, the oil companies, I'm going to exercise my own control over that.
The Tehran Agreement gave the oil producers for the first time the right to join the oil companies in fixing the price of oil.
Their hand became strengthened by the simple realization that oil demand itself was outstripping the potential growth in available supply. This meant the power was shifted to the hands of those who owned the oil and who produced the oil, becoming a seller's market.
This shift in the marketplace was an ominous development for Western interests.
The growing and insatiable demand of the Western industrial nations for oil, coming on top of a tightening world oil market, meant that the oil exporters were acquiring a new form of power, a political power, and a political power that could be transformed into something called the oil weapon.
Egypt's president, Anwar Sadat, planned to use the oil weapon against Israel. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia promised his support, and on U.S. television warned of what might happen.
We do not wish to place any restrictions on our oil exports to the United States, but as I mentioned, America's complete support of Zionism against the Arabs makes it extremely difficult for us to continue to supply the United States petroleum needs, or even to maintain our friendship with the United States.
Washington ignored the omens.
Saudi Arabia had tried to warn the United States throughout the spring and summer of 1973 that if war came, and if the United States helped Israel to a great extent, there would be a violent reaction in the Arab world, and that oil would be used as a weapon in this war. The American government chose not to believe those warnings.
In October 1973, on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur, Egyptian forces stormed across the Suez Canal. Syrian forces attacked in the north. Caught by surprise, the Israelis reeled back. In Vienna, OPEC countries were preparing to meet the Western oil companies and force prices up again. Delegates were still arriving on the very day that the Arab-Israeli war broke out. Two wars were being waged, one on the battlefields in the Middle East and one in the corridors of the Intercontinental Hotel. Both were to shake the world.
October 73 is the time when OPEC alone decided on the price of oil without the oil companies.
2s and 3s would get together in somebody's suite, like Yamani's suite.
We knew what was the price of products and the price of crude oil, and we wanted to have our share as fairly as it is possible.